You won't believe what happens next. A poor boy, no family fortune, no connections, just a heart full of courage, finds an old billionaire collapsed on the street. Most people would walk away, but not him. He kneels down, helps the man, never imagining that this single act of kindness would change everything. The billionaire, cold, ruthless, and alone, was stunned by the boy's compassion. He didn't know what to do until something unimaginable happened. In a city where money talks and power rules, this boy's simple act sparked a chain of events that no one saw coming. Families helped, strangers inspired, doors opened that were once thought impossible. But it wasn't easy. Jealousy, doubt, and danger lurked at every corner. People tried to silence him, to use him, to test his heart. Yet through every trial, the boy's courage never wavered. By the end, what happened will shock you, move you, and remind you that one small act can change the course of a life. Will he rise as a hero, or will the world crush him before he even gets a chance? Stay with us, because this is a story about courage, kindness, and a boy who taught a billionaire and all of us what truly matters. Welcome to Brainfuel, the place where stories of courage, inspiration, and life-changing moments come alive. From ordinary people doing extraordinary things to real-life tales that will blow your mind, we bring you stories that fuel your heart and mind. Let's dive in. Stop, look, listen. Everything changed in one violent second. The old man collapsed hard onto the freezing sidewalk, his body hitting the ground with a dull, helpless sound. His cane slipped from his hand and rolled across the concrete, stopping near the feet of strangers who immediately stepped back. A few people gasped, others turned away. Cars slowed, then sped up again, as if nothing had happened. In the middle of that chaos stood a poor black boy, barely 13, thin, worn shoes, torn jacket, eyes wide with fear. His heart slammed against his chest. For one brief moment, he didn't move. Then instinct took over. "Sir!" the boy shouted as he ran forward, dropping to his knees beside the fallen man. "Sir, can you hear me?" His voice trembled, cracked by fear and confusion. The old man's eyes were half open, unfocused, his breath shallow and uneven. People gathered, but no one stepped in. A woman whispered, "Don't touch him." A man shook his head, muttering, "Not our problem." Someone else laughed awkwardly, trying to break the tension. The boy looked around, disbelief filling his face. "Please," he said, louder now, tears forming in his eyes. "Someone help me." No one moved. The boy swallowed hard, fear tightening his throat. He gently placed his small hand over the old man's shaking one, trying to warm it. "Don't die," he whispered, almost to himself. "Please don't die." The old man's fingers twitched slightly. That tiny movement filled the boy with sudden hope. He quickly took off his thin jacket, folded it, and slid it under the man's head. His hands shook as he pulled out his cheap phone, its cracked screen barely responding. Come on," he whispered as he dialed emergency services. 911, what's your emergency?" the operator asked. "There's a man, he collapsed, he's not breathing right," the boy rushed out, breathless panic. "Please hurry." The operator replied, "Stay calm, help is on the way." The boy stayed on his knees, ignoring the cold seeping through his pants. He spoke to the old man continuously, afraid silence might steal him away. "Sir, my name is Elijah," he said softly. "You're not alone. I'm right here." A man in a suit scoffed from behind. "Kid, move. Let professionals handle it." Elijah turned around, anger flashing in his eyes. "Then why aren't you helping?" he snapped. The man had no answer. Elijah turned back, squeezing the old man's hand tighter. His own past flashed through his mind, nights without food, his mother crying quietly, his little sister asking when things would get better. He knew what it felt like to be invisible. "I won't leave you," Elijah promised. The old man's lips moved slightly. "Water," he whispered. I don't have any," Elijah said, voice breaking. "But help is coming, I swear." Sirens echoed in the distance. Elijah's shoulders sagged slightly, but he stayed alert. The crowd shifted, suddenly interested now that help was arriving. When the ambulance finally screeched to a stop, paramedics jumped out. "Step back," one ordered. Elijah hesitated, fear gripping him. "Please," he said, looking up at them. "He needs help." One paramedic paused, noticing Elijah's shaking hands and tear-streaked face. "You did good, kid," he said gently. As they lifted the old man onto the stretcher, Elijah watched closely. His hand slipped from his grasp, and Elijah felt an unexpected ache at his chest. Just before the doors closed, the old man reached out weakly and caught Elijah's fingers again. "Thank you," the man whispered, barely audible. Elijah nodded, unable to speak. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sirens screaming as it sped away. The crowd slowly dispersed, the sidewalk returning to normal as if nothing had happened. Elijah stood alone. His knees felt weak. His hands were still trembling. He looked at the empty space where the man had been lying moments ago. For the first time, tears fully escaped his eyes. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed even though no one was watching. He didn't know who that man was. He didn't know what would happen next. All Elijah knew was that for one moment, when the world chose to look away, he chose to stay. The ambulance disappeared into the distance, its siren fading until it became just another sound swallowed by the city. Elijah stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the place where the old man had fallen. The cold finally hit him. His knees ached, his hands shook uncontrollably. People walked past him again, just like before. A woman glanced at him and frowned. A man checked his phone and stepped around him. No one asked if he was okay. Elijah swallowed hard. He picked up his thin jacket from the ground, brushing off the dirt with slow, tired movements. As he slipped it back on, he noticed a dark stain where the old man's head had rested. Elijah stared at it for a moment, his chest tightening. "He could have died," Elijah whispered to himself. The thought sent a wave of fear through him. A security guard from a nearby building finally approached. "Kid, you all right?" he asked, not meeting Elijah's eyes. Elijah nodded, though it wasn't true. "Yes, sir," he replied softly. The guard shrugged and walked away. Elijah watched him go, something inside him sinking. He turned and started the long walk home, shoulders slumped, feet heavy. Every step replayed the moment in his mind, the fall, the crowd, the man's weak hand gripping his own. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since morning. As he passed a small grocery store, the smell of fresh bread drifted into the street. Elijah slowed, pressing his hand against his stomach. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins, nowhere near enough. He sighed and kept walking. When he reached his apartment building, the paint was peeling and the stairs creaked loudly. Inside, his mother sat at the small table, counting bills with shaking hands. His little sister Lila sat nearby, drawing on scrap paper. "Elijah!" Lila jumped up when she saw him. "You're late!" His mother looked up sharply. "Where were you?" she asked, fear clear in her voice. Elijah hesitated. He didn't want to scare her. Someone collapsed," he said slowly, careful honesty. "An old man. I helped him." His mother's face drained of color. "Are you hurt?" she asked, rushing toward him. "No, Mama," Elijah said quickly. "I'm okay." She pulled him into a tight hug anyway. Elijah closed his eyes, finally letting himself feel safe. "You scared me," she whispered, crying softly. "I'm sorry," Elijah replied, guilt filling his chest. They sat down together. Elijah told her everything: the fall, the crowd, the ambulance. His mother listened without interrupting, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When he finished, she let out a long breath. "You did the right thing," she said firmly, "no matter what anyone else did." "But nobody helped," Elijah said, frustration rising. "They just watched." His mother nodded slowly. "Sometimes the world is cold," she said softly. "But that's why people like you matter." Elijah looked down, unsure how to feel. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's face, pale and fragile. He wondered if the man was alive, if he was alone, if anyone cared. "Please be okay," Elijah whispered into the darkness. The next morning at school, Elijah couldn't focus. His teacher's voice blurred into noise. His classmates laughed and joked, unaware of the weight pressing on his chest. During lunch, a boy nudged him. "You hear about that old rich guy who collapsed downtown?" he asked. Elijah's head snapped up. "Rich guy?" he repeated. "Yeah, my uncle said it was some billionaire or something." Elijah's heart skipped. He said nothing, pushing his food away. The idea felt unreal. That man, the weak hand, the quiet voice, didn't feel like a billionaire. That afternoon, as Elijah walked home again, a black car slowly pulled up beside him. Its windows were tinted. The engine purred quietly. Elijah stopped walking. The car window rolled down. A man in a dark suit leaned out, his expression serious. "Elijah Carter?" the man asked. Elijah's throat went dry. "Yes?" he replied carefully. The man studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Someone would like to see you." Elijah's pulse thundered in his ears. "Why?" he asked uncertainly. The man opened the back door of the car. "You helped him when no one else did." Elijah understood immediately. His legs felt weak, but something deeper pushed him forward. He took one last look at the street he knew so well, then stepped toward the car. Whatever waited ahead, Elijah knew his life was already changing. The car door closed softly behind Elijah, but the sound felt loud inside his chest. He sat stiffly on the leather seat, hands folded tightly in his lap. The smell inside the car was clean and unfamiliar, nothing like the dusty buses he usually rode. The suited man sat in the front, eyes forward, silent. No music played, no words were spoken. Elijah swallowed hard. "Where are we going?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll see soon," the man replied calmly. That answer did nothing to ease Elijah's fear. The city passed by outside the window, stores, people, cracked sidewalks, slowly replaced by tall buildings, clean streets, and shining glass towers. Elijah pressed his forehead lightly against the window. This wasn't his world. He felt small, out of place. After a while, the car stopped in front of a massive building with guards at the entrance. Elijah's breath caught. The suited man stepped out first and opened Elijah's door. "Follow me," he said. Elijah nodded and stepped out, his worn shoes touching polished stone. People in suits walked past him without looking twice. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself. Inside, the building was quiet and bright. The elevator ride felt endless. Elijah's ears popped as they rose higher and higher. Finally, the doors opened to a long hallway. At the end stood a large door. The man knocked once, then opened it. Inside the room sat the old man. Elijah stopped breathing for a second. The man looked completely different now. Clean clothes, neatly combed hair, sharp eyes filled with life. Yet Elijah recognized him instantly. It was the same man whose hand had trembled in his own. The old man smiled slowly. "Elijah," he said gently, "I was hoping you'd come." Elijah stood frozen. "Sir, you're okay?" he finally asked. "Because of you," the man replied. The suited man quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. The silence felt heavy. Elijah shifted his feet. I didn't know who you were," he said quickly. "I know," the old man interrupted softly. "That's exactly why I wanted to see you." He gestured to a chair across from him. Elijah sat carefully, afraid to break something. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching. "My name is Henry Blackwood," the man said. Elijah nodded slowly, still confused. "When I collapsed," Henry continued, his voice turning serious, "I saw many faces: fear, curiosity, judgment." He paused. But only one face showed concern. Elijah looked down. "You stayed," Henry said. "You spoke to me. You held my hand." Elijah's chest tightened. "I didn't want you to die," he said simply. Henry leaned back, his eyes glistening. "Do you know how long it's been since someone spoke to me like that?" he asked. Elijah shook his head. "Years," Henry said. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Henry straightened. "Elijah, tell me about yourself." Elijah hesitated. No one important had ever asked him that before. "I live with my mom and my sister," he began. "We don't have much." Henry listened closely, leaning forward. "I try to help," Elijah continued, quiet pride. "I walk my sister to school. I help my mom when I can." "And what do you want?" Henry asked. Elijah blinked. "Want?" "Yes," Henry said, encouraging tone. "For yourself." Elijah stared at the floor. "I don't know," he admitted, vulnerable truth. "I just want things to be better." Henry nodded, eyes thoughtful. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. Elijah's heart jumped. "This is not payment," Henry said firmly. "It's an opportunity." Elijah didn't touch it, captious respect. "Before that," Henry added, his voice softening, "I need to ask you something." Elijah looked up. "When you saw me fall," Henry asked slowly, "what did you think?" Elijah answered without hesitation, "I thought you were someone's father or grandfather, someone who mattered." Henry's breath caught. His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. In that moment, Elijah realized something important. He hadn't just saved a man's life. He had reminded him that he was human. The room fell into silence again, but this time it felt warm. And for the first time since stepping into that car, Elijah felt no fear at all. The silence in the room slowly broke as Henry Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting lightly on the desk. Elijah watched him carefully, unsure what would happen next. The air felt heavy, like something important was about to be said. Henry cleared his throat. "Elijah," he began gently, "I've met thousands of people in my life, powerful people, smart people, rich people." He paused, looking directly into Elijah's eyes, "but very few good people." Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not special," he said quietly. "I just helped." Henry smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was tired. "That's what scares me," he replied, "because helping should be normal, yet that day it wasn't." Henry slowly stood up and walked toward the window. He looked down at the city far below. "When I was young," he said, "I was poor too, very poor." Elijah's head lifted in surprise. "I slept in crowded rooms," Henry continued. "I worked jobs that broke my body. I promised myself I would never be weak again." His voice hardened slightly. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot what weakness felt like." Elijah listened closely, his chest tight. "When I collapsed," Henry said, turning back around, "I felt fear like I hadn't felt in decades." He placed a hand over his heart. "And in that moment, money meant nothing." Elijah nodded slowly. Henry walked back to his chair and sat down. "Do you know what hurt the most?" he asked softly. Elijah shook his head. "Not the pain," Henry said, "not the fear." He paused again. "It was being invisible." Those words hit Elijah hard. "I know that feeling," Elijah said without thinking. Henry looked at him sharply. "You do?" Elijah nodded, swallowing. "People look through me every day, like I'm not there." For a moment, Henry said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then you understand why I needed to meet you." Henry reached for a folder on the desk and slid it toward Elijah. Elijah stared at it but didn't touch it. "This is not charity," Henry said firmly, "and it's not a reward." Elijah finally looked up. "Then what is it?" he asked softly. "It's responsibility," Henry replied. Elijah's heart skipped. Henry opened the folder, revealing documents, photos, and handwritten notes. "I'm starting something new," he explained, "a foundation, one that helps children who are ignored, overlooked, and forgotten." Elijah's breath caught. "I want you to be part of it," Henry continued, "not as a symbol, not as a story." He leaned forward, "but as a voice." Elijah's hands began to shake. "Me?" he whispered. "Yes," Henry said simply, "because you see people, and the world needs more of that." Elijah stood up suddenly. "I don't know anything about foundations," he said quickly. "I'm just a kid." Henry smiled gently. "So was I once," he replied, "and someone believed in me." Elijah felt a lump rise in his throat. "What if I mess up?" he asked fearfully. Henry's voice softened. "Then we learn," he said, "together." There was a knock on the door. The suited man stepped inside. "Your doctor is here," he said. Henry nodded. He turned back to Elijah. "We'll continue this conversation," he said, "but first I need you to understand one thing." Elijah leaned in slightly. "You didn't save me because I'm rich," Henry said. "You saved me because you're strong." Elijah's eyes filled with tears. He blinked hard, trying to hold them back. Henry stood and extended his hand. Elijah hesitated, then took it. Their handshake was firm, equal. As Elijah turned to leave the room, his legs felt weak, but his heart felt full. The suited man escorted him back through the hallway. Everything looked the same, but Elijah felt different. Outside, the sunlight hit his face. He paused on the steps, taking a deep breath. He didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in his life, someone had looked at him and seen more than a poor boy. And that changed everything. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling as the city noises drifted in through the window. Every few seconds, his mind replayed Henry Blackwood's words, his voice, his eyes, the weight of that handshake. It didn't feel real. It felt like a dream he might wake up from at any moment. He turned onto his side, pulling the blanket up to his chest. "What if I mess everything up?" he whispered into the darkness. No one answered. In the next room, he heard his mother coughing softly. His sister mumbled in her sleep. Elijah closed his eyes tightly. Everything he did from now on mattered, not just for him, but for them. The next morning, a knock came at the door. Elijah's mother froze, worry flashing across her face. "What's it for?" she asked cautiously. "Good morning, ma'am," a calm voice replied from the other side. "My name is Mr. Harris. I'm here to speak with Elijah Carter." Elijah's stomach dropped. He opened the door slowly. The same suited man stood there, holding a folder. Neighbors peeked from their doors. "Is something wrong?" Elijah's mother asked, stepping forward. "No," Mr. Harris said quickly. "Nothing is wrong. In fact, something very good is happening." Elijah glanced at his mother. She nodded slightly, trusting him. Inside, Mr. Harris sat at their small table, his expensive suit looking out of place. He slid documents forward slowly. "Mr. Blackwood would like to formally invite Elijah to join a program he is starting," he explained. "This includes mentorship, education support, and resources for your family." Elijah's mother's hands began to shake. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because your son showed courage when others didn't," Mr. Harris replied. Elijah looked down, heat rising in his face. Later that day, Elijah returned to Henry's building. This time his mother came with him. She held his hand tightly as they rode the elevator up. Henry stood when they entered the room. "Mrs. Carter," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." She nodded, cautious but polite. "My son tells me you changed his life," she said. Henry smiled sadly. "No," he replied, "he changed mine." They sat. The room felt quieter than before. Henry folded his hands together. "Elijah, I want to be very clear," he said. "This is not charity." Elijah stiffened. "I don't believe in giving without purpose," Henry continued. "I believe in building." He turned to Elijah's mother. "Your son has something rare, empathy, and empathy can move mountains if guided properly." Elijah's mother blinked back tears. "He's just a boy," she said. "And that," Henry replied gently, "is why he can still change the world." Henry slid another envelope toward Elijah. "This is support for your family," he said carefully. "Housing assistance, medical care, education." Elijah shook his head instinctively. "I didn't help you for money," he said firmly. Henry's eyes softened. "I know," he replied. "That's why you deserve help now." Silence filled the room. Elijah's mother covered her mouth, tears finally falling. "I've prayed for help," she whispered. "I just never knew where it would come from." Henry nodded slowly. "Sometimes help comes from the people we least expect." Elijah felt something heavy lift inside his chest. "But there is one condition," Henry added. Elijah's heart jumped. "You must stay who you are," Henry said. "No arrogance, no forgetting where you came from." Elijah met his eyes. "I won't," he said. Henry leaned back, satisfied. As they prepared to leave, Henry stopped Elijah at the door. "Elijah," he said quietly, "do you know why I collapsed that day?" Elijah shook his head. "Because I was alone," Henry admitted, "surrounded by wealth, but completely alone." Elijah's throat tightened. "You reminded me," Henry continued, "that life is not measured by how much you own, but by who would kneel beside you when you fall." Elijah nodded slowly. Outside, the sky was brighter than usual. Elijah squeezed his mother's hand. For the first time, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. And somewhere deep inside, Elijah knew this was only the beginning. Life did not change overnight. That surprised Elijah the most. He still woke up early, still walked his sister to school, still heard his mother sigh quietly as she made breakfast with too little food. The walls were the same, the neighborhood was the same, yet something inside him felt different. Hope had entered the room, and it refused to leave. A few days later, Elijah returned to Henry Blackwood's building alone. The elevator ride felt longer this time. His palms were sweaty, his thoughts raced. When the doors opened, Henry was already waiting. "You're early," Henry said, smiling slightly. "I didn't want to be late," Elijah replied quickly. Henry nodded, motioning for him to sit. "That tells me a lot about you." Elijah sat across from him, shoulders stiff. Henry folded his hands. "Today isn't about money," he said clearly. "It's about choices." Elijah listened closely. "When I was your age," Henry continued, "I believed success meant never needing anyone." He paused, eyes darkening. "That belief made me powerful, but it also made me lonely." Elijah swallowed. "I don't want you to become like me," Henry said honestly. "I want you to become better." That scared Elijah more than any offer of money. Henry stood and walked toward a large board on the wall. Photos were pinned there. Children, schools, shelters. "These are places we'll help," Henry explained. "But help doesn't mean saving people." Elijah frowned slightly. "It means listening," Henry clarified. "Just like you listened to me when I fell." Elijah's chest tightened. Henry turned back to him. "I want you to speak to these kids," he said. "Hear their stories. Tell me what they need." Elijah's eyes widened. "Me? But I don't—" "You do," Henry interrupted gently. "You understand them in a way I never could." Elijah looked down, hands gripping his knees. "What if I say the wrong thing?" he asked. Henry smiled softly. "Then you apologize and learn." That answer surprised Elijah. Later that week, Elijah stood inside a small community center. Kids sat in folding chairs, some laughing, some quiet, some angry. He felt their eyes on him. "You don't have to be perfect," Henry whispered from the back of the room. Elijah took a deep breath. "My name is Elijah," he began. "I'm not here to fix your life." A few kids snorted. "I'm here to listen," Elijah continued, honest calm. The room grew quieter. One by one they spoke, about hunger, anger, parents who worked too much or not at all. Elijah listened, nodding, eyes heavy with emotion. When a boy his age said, "Nobody cares," Elijah felt it hit his chest. "I care," Elijah said softly. The boy looked away, blinking fast. That night, Elijah sat across from Henry again. "They don't need speeches," Elijah said. "They need to feel seen." Henry smiled, eyes shining. "Exactly," he said. Weeks passed. Elijah balanced school and meetings, fear and excitement. Some days were too much. Other days felt like purpose. One evening, Henry handed Elijah a check. Elijah recoiled slightly. "It's for supplies," Henry said calmly. "You decide how to use it." Elijah hesitated, then took it. Later, Elijah spent it all on books, meals, and bus passes for kids who needed them. He kept none for himself. Henry watched quietly. "You could have kept some," Henry said later. Elijah met his eyes. "They need it more." Henry closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there were tears. That night, Henry admitted something he had never said aloud. "I've signed deals worth billions," he said. None of them felt like this. Elijah didn't smile. He understood the weight of that statement. But the world won't always clap for you, Henry warned. Some will question you. Some will try to use you. Elijah nodded. I know. Why? Henry asked. Because they already do, Elijah replied. Henry exhaled slowly. As Elijah left the building that night, the city lights reflected in the glass walls. He felt tired, but not empty. He had refused money. He had chosen purpose. And without realizing it, Elijah had passed his first real test. The letter arrived on a rainy afternoon. Elijah almost didn't open it. It sat on the small kitchen table, the envelope thick and heavy, his name printed neatly across the front. Rain tapped against the window in a slow, steady rhythm. His mother wiped her hands on a towel and stared at it too long. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Elijah replied, fingers hovering over the seal. He tore it open carefully. The papers slid out, formal letters, stamps, signatures. Elijah's eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His breath caught. "What does it say?" his mother whispered, trembling voice. Elijah tried to speak, but no sound came out. He handed her the papers. Her hands began to shake as she read. One hand flew to her mouth, emotional surge. Tears welled up and spilled over. "Elijah," she whispered, voice breaking, This says full scholarship." Elijah nodded slowly, disbelief mixed with joy. "Not just school," she continued, flipping pages. "Housing support, medical care, food assistance." Layla peeked around the corner. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. "No, baby," their mother said, pulling her close, relieved embrace. We're going to be okay." Elijah sank into a chair. His chest felt tight, like too much emotion was trapped inside. He pressed his palms to his face, trembling hands. "I didn't ask for this," he whispered, uncertain guilt. His mother knelt in front of him, lifting his chin gently. Loving care. "You didn't ask," she said, firm assurance. "You earned it by being who you are." That night, Elijah couldn't stop staring at the ceiling again, restless thoughts. This time, fear mixed with hope, conflicted emotion. "What if people think I'm lucky, not capable?" he wondered, self-doubt. The next day, at school, everything felt different, shifting reality. Whispers followed him in the hallway, curious murmurs. A teacher smiled longer than usual, sudden attention. Even his classmates looked at him differently, unsettling change. "You're that kid," someone said, under their breath. Jealous tone. Elijah kept walking. Quiet resolve. After school, Henry invited Elijah to his office again. Formal summons. This time, reporters waited outside the building, flashing cameras. Elijah froze at the sight of them. Sudden fear. Henry noticed immediately. Protective awareness. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly, reassuring tone. "I can," Elijah replied after a pause, steady courage. They stood together in front of the microphones, intense pressure. Cameras flashed, blinding lights. "How does it feel to change your life overnight?" a reporter asked, probing question. Elijah swallowed, dry throat. "My life didn't change overnight," he said slowly, calm clarity. "It's been hard for a long time." The crowd quieted, sudden silence. "Why help a billionaire?" another voice called, skeptical tone. Elijah met the cameras directly, steady gaze. "I didn't know he was rich," he said, honest truth. "I just knew he needed help." Henry placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder, supportive presence. The questions kept coming, relentless pressure, some kind, some sharp, mixed intent. Elijah answered honestly, simply, refusing to dramatize his pain, controlled emotion. Later, alone in Henry's office, Elijah finally exhaled, released breath. "You did well," Henry said, proud praise. "I was scared," Elijah admitted, open confession. Henry nodded, understanding. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said, wise tone. "It's choosing to stand anyway." That night, Elijah walked through his neighborhood again, familiar ground. Kids played on the sidewalk. Neighbors nodded differently now, shifting respect. A man called out, "Proud of you, kid." Warm approval. Elijah smiled, but it felt heavy, mixed emotions. Inside his apartment, his mother was on the phone, crying softly. Emotional call. "Yes," she said repeatedly, trembling gratitude. Thank you so much." Elijah sat beside Layla, helping her with homework, quiet normalcy. She looked up at him, admiring eyes. "Are you famous now?" she asked, childlike wonder. He laughed softly, nervous laughter. "No," he said, "I'm still me." Before bed, Henry called, late night call. "Are you holding up?" Henry asked, caring concern. "I think so," Elijah replied, honest uncertainty. "Everything's moving fast." "It will," Henry said, calm warning. "Just remember, this isn't about you alone." "I know," Elijah said, confident understanding. "It's about what we do next." Henry smiled on the other end of the line, quiet pride. As Elijah hung up, he looked around his small room, reflective pause. Nothing had changed yet, and everything had. Powerful contrast. The letter lay folded on the table, symbol of turning point. It wasn't just paper. It was proof that one act of kindness could echo far beyond a single moment. And Elijah was ready for what came next. Confident and strong. The weeks turned into months, and Elijah's life became a whirlwind of schedules, meetings, and responsibilities. Every morning he woke before the sun, brushing his teeth quickly, grabbing a slice of bread, and walking his sister Lila to school. The neighborhood hadn't changed, but Elijah had. His heart felt heavier and stronger at the same time. He had become the boy who helped a billionaire, but he refused to let that define him. Instead, he focused on the kids at the community centers, on the letters he received from children asking for advice, and on the projects Henry had assigned him. Each day brought new challenges, but Elijah was learning how to navigate them. One morning, Elijah arrived at a new center, a run-down building in the heart of the city. The walls were cracked, the windows dirty, and the floors sticky. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that it wasn't about appearances, it was about impact. Inside, a group of children stared at him suspiciously. Many had been abandoned, neglected, or overlooked. Their eyes were sharp, protective, and curious all at once. Elijah knelt down to their level, meeting them eye to eye. "Hi, I'm Elijah," he said gently. "I'm here to listen." A boy named Marcus crossed his arms and scowled. "Why should we listen to you?" he demanded. Elijah smiled softly. "Because I've been where you are," he replied. "I know what it feels like when no one notices you. I know how it feels to want to help but not have anyone believe in you." The room went quiet. Then a little girl whispered, "Do you really understand?" Elijah nodded. "I do," he said, "and I want to make sure you all feel heard." The children slowly began to open up. They spoke about their struggles, parents who argued, teachers who ignored them, friends who left them behind. Elijah listened, never interrupting, never judging. Every story was a reminder of why he was here. By the end of the session, the children had begun to trust him. Marcus even cracked a small smile. Afterward, Elijah sat down with Henry to discuss the day's events. "You handled that very well," Henry said, his voice calm but proud. "Some adults would have struggled." Elijah shook his head. "I just listened," he said softly. Henry smiled knowingly. "Listening is the hardest thing for many people, but it changes everything." Elijah felt a swell of pride mixed with exhaustion. He was making a difference, yet the weight of responsibility was undeniable. That evening, Elijah returned home to find his mother and Lila waiting. His mother hugged him tightly. "How was your day?" she asked. "It was good," Elijah said, trying to sound casual. "We helped some kids today." Lila's eyes sparkled. "Really? Did you play with them?" she asked. Elijah chuckled softly. "Yes, we played," he said. That night, as he lay in bed, Elijah reflected on the journey he had been through. From the boy who helped a fallen billionaire on a cold street to someone whose actions could now change the lives of many. He realized that kindness and courage weren't always rewarded with applause. They were measured in small victories, in smiles, in letters, and in trust. A week later, Elijah received a call from Henry with an invitation to a major event. This time, it wasn't just about recognition, it was about policy, about helping an entire city through structured programs. Elijah felt nervous. He had never spoken in front of so many adults, so many powerful people. But Henry's encouragement was clear. "Remember, you are the voice for the children. Speak from your heart, and nothing else matters." The day of the event arrived. The hall was enormous, filled with executives, politicians, and community leaders. Cameras flashed constantly, and reporters whispered to one another. Elijah felt the weight of their gaze. Henry introduced him to the crowd. "This is Elijah Carter," he said proudly, "a boy whose courage reminds us what real humanity looks like." Elijah stepped forward, his knees weak but his resolve firm. He took a deep breath. "I'm not here because I'm special," he said, voice shaking slightly at first. "I'm here because these children deserve to be seen. They deserve to be heard, and they deserve someone who will believe in them even when the world does not." The room went silent. Elijah continued, sharing stories of the children he had met, the letters he had received, the moments when small acts of kindness had made enormous differences in their lives. His words were simple but powerful, filled with sincerity. When he finished, there was a pause. Then the audience erupted into applause. Henry's eyes glistened with tears. Backstage, Elijah leaned against the wall, finally letting himself breathe. "I didn't know I could do that," he admitted. Henry smiled warmly. "You've always had it in you," he said. "You just needed the chance to step forward." Elijah left the hall that night, walking under the city lights. For the first time, he understood the full meaning of courage, not as a single act, but as a continuous choice to care, to act, and to stand even when it's difficult. At home, he sat with his mother and Lila. They didn't need to say anything. The warmth of their presence, the smiles on their faces, the feeling of safety, it all spoke louder than words. As Elijah lay in bed that night, he felt something settle inside him. He was no longer just the poor boy on the street. He was a voice, a helper, a leader, and someone who understood that the world could be changed one act of courage at a time. And in the quiet of the night, he whispered to himself, "I will keep helping, no matter what." Because Elijah now knew something powerful. True change doesn't come from money, fame, or recognition. It comes from compassion, from standing up when others don't, and from choosing to make a difference every single day. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Elijah's heart, once full of fear and uncertainty, now beat with purpose and strength. He closed his eyes, finally ready to sleep, not just as a boy who helped a billionaire, but as someone who would continue to help the world, one child, one act of kindness at a time. The attention became louder. too loud. Elijah noticed it the moment he stepped outside his apartment that morning. A car slowed down. Someone whispered his name. A phone lifted, recording quietly. His shoulders tensed as he pulled his jacket tighter around himself. Fame didn't feel exciting. It felt heavy. At school, teachers treated him carefully, like he might break. Some classmates smiled too much. Others avoided him completely. Elijah sat at his desk, staring at the board, unable to focus. "You think you're better than us now?" a boy muttered as he passed. Elijah flinched. "No," he replied softly, but the boy was already gone. At lunch, Elijah ate alone. The noise of the cafeteria felt distant. He missed when life was simple, even if it was hard. That afternoon, Henry asked Elijah to attend a public event. "It's small," Henry said calmly, "just donors and community leaders." Elijah nodded, though his stomach twisted. The event was held in a large hall with bright lights and clean white walls. People dressed in fine clothes laughed easily. Elijah felt out of place the moment he entered. Henry stayed close. A woman approached them, smiling wide. "You're the boy," she said, kneeling slightly to Elijah's level. "The hero." Elijah stiffened. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. She laughed lightly. "So modest," she replied, walking away. Elijah watched her go, confusion swirling inside him. "Why do they talk like that?" he asked Henry. Henry's jaw tightened slightly. "Because stories are easier than truth," he replied. On stage, Henry spoke first. He talked about responsibility, about seeing people before numbers. Then he gestured for Elijah to join him. Elijah's heart hammered as he walked up. He stood at the microphone, lights blinding his eyes. The room fell quiet. "I don't like attention," Elijah admitted. A few people chuckled. "But I know what it feels like to be ignored," he continued. The laughter stopped. "When someone helped me," Elijah said slowly, "the emotional control. It wasn't because I was special, it was because they chose to care." The room remained silent. "So, if you're here tonight," Elijah finished, "don't clap for me. Help someone who can't stand on this stage." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, applause erupted, slow at first, then loud. Backstage, Elijah leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "I thought I'd mess up," he admitted. Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "You told the truth," he said. "That's never a mistake." But not everyone was proud. The next day, headlines spread online. Some praised Elijah. Others questioned him. "Is he being used?" one article asked. "Is this all staged?" another claimed. Elijah read the comments late at night. His chest tightened with every harsh word. "They don't know me," he whispered. Henry called immediately when he found out. "Stop reading," he said firmly. "Their noise is not your truth." "But what if they're right?" Elijah asked, shaken doubt. "Then be the author," he said, "not the headline." The pressure continued. At another school visit, a man confronted Henry publicly. "You're exploiting this kid," he said loudly. Elijah stepped forward before Henry could speak. "No one forced me," he said clearly. "I chose to be here." The man scoffed. "You don't even understand what you're part of." Elijah's voice didn't shake. "I understand enough to know I want to help." Silence followed. Later, alone in the car, Elijah stared out the window. "Is it always like this?" he asked. Henry nodded slowly. "Doing good doesn't protect you from doubt," he said. "Sometimes it invites it." Elijah closed his eyes. That night, he returned home later than usual. His mother waited up. "You look tired," she said. "I am," Elijah admitted. She hugged him tightly. "Then rest," she whispered. "You don't have to carry the world alone." As Elijah lay in bed, the noise of the day finally faded. He thought about the comments, the praise, the accusations. Then he remembered the kids at the community center, their faces, their stories. The world could argue. He would keep listening. The sun rose slowly over the city, casting golden light across the streets Elijah had walked so many times before. But today, the streets looked different to him. They were no longer symbols of struggle and limitation. They were paths of possibility, of opportunity, of change. Elijah had spent months learning, growing, and understanding what it truly meant to help others. Every decision he made, every small step he took had led him here, to a moment where he could finally see the impact of his actions. He walked to the community center early, as he always did, carrying his worn backpack filled with books, notebooks, and supplies. Children were already arriving, their laughter echoing down the cracked hallways. Elijah smiled softly, his heart swelling.
Good morning, Elijah.
A little girl called, waving excitedly. Good morning, Ava, Elijah replied, kneeling to her level. Ready to learn today? She nodded vigorously. Yes! The day began with lessons, stories, and activities designed to inspire and teach. Elijah guided the children with patience and care, listening to their worries and encouraging their dreams. Some kids had tears in their eyes as they shared struggles at home. Others had shy smiles as they told stories of personal triumphs. Elijah took each story seriously, never dismissing a single word. Every child was seen, every child was heard. And in that simple act of listening, something miraculous began to happen. The children began to believe in themselves. At noon, Henry arrived at the center. His presence commanded attention, but he never overshadowed Elijah. He observed quietly from the back, watching Elijah interact with the children. After the session, Henry approached Elijah. "You've grown so much," he said softly. "Not just in confidence, but in understanding. You see the heart of every child." Elijah nodded. "I try," he admitted. "Try is not enough," Henry replied with a knowing smile. "You've done more than try. You've inspired." Elijah felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite put into words. He thought of the day he had met Henry, the moment he had helped him on the street, and the journey that had followed. How could a single act have led to this? That afternoon, Elijah received a letter from one of the children. The envelope was decorated with crayon drawings, little hearts, and uneven handwriting. He opened it carefully, reading the words aloud to himself. "Dear Elijah, thank you for believing in me. You make me feel brave. I want to be like you one day." Elijah's eyes filled with tears. He sat on the edge of the chair, holding the letter close. "I didn't know I could make such a difference," he whispered. Henry placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You have," he said. "Every smile, every word, every moment, they add up. You've changed lives, Elijah, and not just theirs, you've changed mine too." Evening fell, and Elijah returned home. The streets were quiet now, the city lights flickering on like stars scattered across the pavement. He walked alongside his mother and Layla, their hands intertwined. His mother looked at him, her eyes soft with pride. "You've grown so much," she said quietly. Elijah shook his head gently. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "I had help, but more than that, I just kept choosing to do what was right." Layla smiled up at him. "I want to be like you," she whispered. Elijah laughed softly. "You already are, in your own way," he said, ruffling her hair. That night, as Elijah lay in bed, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a boy on the street helping a stranger to a young man inspiring hundreds, he had learned the most important lessons of life. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. Kindness was not about reward or recognition, it was seeing others even when no one else would. And strength was not measured in wealth or power, it was measured in compassion, in empathy, in the courage to stand when it mattered most. As he drifted off to sleep, Elijah felt a quiet confidence settle over him. He knew challenges would come. There would be days when the world doubted him, when fear crept in, and the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm him. But he also knew he was ready. He was no longer just the poor boy on the street. He was a leader, a voice, and a force for change. And he would continue every single day to make the world a little brighter, one act of courage, one act of kindness, one child at a time. The city outside was quiet now, but inside Elijah's heart, a storm of hope, determination, and love burned brighter than ever. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of his family around him, the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, and the knowledge that he was exactly where he was meant to be. And in that moment, Elijah Carter understood the truth he had carried since the day he helped Henry Blackwood. It is not wealth, fame, or power that defines a person. It is the courage to act, the kindness to care, and the determination to make a difference. And with that understanding, he slept peacefully, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The journey had begun on a cold street with a hand extended in compassion, and it would continue forever. Elijah Carter was no longer just a boy. He was a symbol, a voice, and a living testament to the power of humanity. And the world would never forget the lesson he silently taught. Even one small act of kindness can change everything.